Student loan payments pause is going to end. It's going to end December 30th. I'm extending to December 31st, 2022, and it's going to end at that time. It's time for the payments to resume. Second, my campaign for president, I made a commitment. That would provide student debt relief. And I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allowed them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced $20,000. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, making under $125,000 a year. If you make more than that, you don't qualify.
Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of Viral. On this program, we talk about President Joe Biden announced that many people who were on the student loans or went to college, the student loan forgiveness program is in effect, and we'll get to the details coming up on what that means for a lot of college students who were struggling and now have relief that many people are praising. We'll get to that in a minute on this program, but first thing first, join on the conversation using the hashtag Viral here on Connect, and don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing is caring. Tell a friend, call a friend, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss a thing here on Viral. We talk about President Joe Biden announced that he is going to eliminate some of the student loan debt through the student loan forgiveness program that he made in his campaign promise that he was running for president, and he actually delivered. President Joe Biden laid out the plan of the forgiveness program that if you're a college student and he wiped out $10,000 for folks who was making under $125,000, or if you have a Pell Grant, you get $20,000 eliminated. Plus on that, now some folks argue that this will burden even more people to give them a handout, and we'll get to that in a minute. But a lot of people are happy and elated. Let's get to the latest on what's going on with the student forgiveness program and how this affects all college students and all undergrad college students that need a helping hand. Take a look.
There are three key factors what we're going to do today. First, we've made incredible progress advancing America's economic recovery. We've wound down pandemic relief programs like the ones on unemployment insurance and small businesses. It's time we do the same thing for student loans. Student loan payments pause is going to end. It's going to end December 30th. I'm extending to December 31st, 2022, and it's going to end at that time. It's time for the payments to resume. Second, my campaign for president, I made a commitment. That would provide student debt relief, and I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allowed them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced $20,000. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, making under $125,000 a year. If you make more than that, you don't qualify. No high-income individual or high-income household, on top of the 5%, in the top 5% of incomes, by the way, will benefit from this action, period. In fact, about 90% of the eligible beneficiaries make under $75,000 as a family. Here's what that means. If you make under $125,000, you get $10,000 knocked off your student debt. If you make under $125,000 a year and you received a Pell Grant, you'll get an additional $10,000 knocked off that total. for a total of $20,000 relief. 95% of the borrowers can benefit from these actions. That's 43 million people. Of the 43 million, over 60% are Pell Grant recipients. That's 27 million people who will get $20,000 in debt relief. Nearly 45% can have their student debt fully canceled. That's 20 million people who can start getting on with their lives. All this means people can start finally crawl out from under that mountain of debt, to get on top of their rent and their utilities, to finally think about buying a home or starting a family or starting a business. And by the way, when this happens, the whole economy is better off. In the coming weeks, the Department of Education will lay out in detail a short and simple form to apply for this relief, along with information when this application process opens. By resuming student loan payments at the same time as we provide targeted relief, we're taking an economically responsible course. As a consequence, about $50 billion a year will start coming back into the Treasury because of resumption of debt. Independent experts agree that these actions taken together will provide real benefits for families without meaningful effect on inflation.
All right, you saw right there in the news story, President Joe Biden laid out the plan, that what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. Now, this plan will extend, so it will be paused for now until December. Once January resume, this is the final time everyone must pay. But Biden gave them somewhat of a gift, $10,000 eliminated, plus you being held off on your student loans until next year. So this is a boost and a good start for some people that who are struggling, who are trying to make ends meet, and on those places. While on the other side, the Republican side, the conservative side, feel like student loans are crippling America and it puts us more in debt than ever before. All right, let's hear what you people had to say about President Joe Biden eliminating student loan debt for $10,000 for people who qualify for student loan debts and giving them that helping need hand. And with that, let's hear what you people had to say right now.
When it comes to the education system in our country, Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Secretary, welcome back and thank you for being here. It's a very busy day for you.
Happy to be with you.
First off, today is obviously a big day for the 45 million Americans with federal student loan debt. Finally, some relief when it comes to student loans, right? But tell us why and how the government decided on $10,000 to $20,000 of relief and a salary cap.
Sure. Well, look, the goal of this is to make sure that Americans are not worse off than they were before the pandemic. And we know that 90% of the money going here is going to go to people making less than $75,000. So that's significant. We know middle-class Americans, those who are struggling financially, are having a hard time paying loans. And we know that we want to avoid defaults when loans restart in January. And we think $10,000 in loan forgiveness for anyone making under $125,000 is the right thing to do. And if you're a Pell recipient, meaning you qualify because of your low income, you're eligible for $20,000.
Absolutely. This is great news for so many Americans. The lump sum is great, but is this a one and done kind of solution? What about the reduction of interest rates?
Right.
Would that be more of a long-term option to provide everyone?
I'm glad you mentioned that because, loan forgiveness, the $20,000 in loan forgiveness is getting a lot of attention, and it should. No other president has done anything close. But I'm just as proud of the work that we're doing to improve income-driven repayment, which means we're not going to ask folks to pay more than they can afford. So we went from requiring folks for their undergrad degree to pay 10% of their income, their disposable income, down to 5%. That means half of their payments are going to have to be made now. And lastly, we're going to continue to fight to double Pell. We know that Pell helps level the playing field and gives access to more people from lower income communities to have access to higher education.
Secretary, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you said about 90% of Americans would benefit from this. Why not make this a kind of for everyone? so that everyone can benefit from this as opposed to having a salary cap?
Sure, 90% of the money will be directed toward people making under $75,000. That's significant. What that does is level the playing field to those who are most impacted by the pandemic. This is targeted relief to make sure that folks are not worse off after the pandemic than they were before. The income-driven repayment and the public service loan forgiveness is for everyone. So we want to make sure that everyone takes advantage of that by visiting studentaid.gov and learning more about it.
What's your message to those who didn't attend college because it was too expensive or did manage to pay off their debt and now feel they are, quote, footing the bill for others?
Well, look, this is very consistent with what we did during the pandemic to other groups, right? Small business owners needed a little bit of support, and we provided that to keep them open and keep them in business. And we're investing in Americans right now. So to those who have paid for it, we're targeting those who are struggling right now to help get them on their feet, and that helps everyone, because when you have less people defaulting on loans, that helps everyone's economy.
And Secretary, you're the first Latino in your position. Felicidades. According to the Student Borrower Protection Center, about 90% of Black Americans and 72% of Latinos take loans to attend college, compared to 66% of white students. Now, regardless of race and ethnicity, higher education has more than half of our youth in debt.
Right.
How are we making this a better system?
Right, and really, this is not partisan, right? We want to help Americans on the long-term policies that we're working on: public service loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment. We're making sure that it's affordable. So some of these first-generation college students or families that have modest means, they too have access to the American dream through higher education.
Let's talk about what's next. While the move has been celebrated by the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and by We the 45 Million, which is a student loan activist organization, their wording has been very specific. They said this is a great first step, but what's next? Will there be more? What strides are we making?
Look, keep tabs on what we're doing. This announcement today wasn't the first one. We've forgiven over $32 billion in loans from day one since this president took office. That's more than any other administration combined, right? We're fixing a broken system. Public service loan forgiveness. There was a 98% denial rate. We got that number up. We've forgiven over $10 billion just in public service loan forgiveness. Keep holding us accountable. We want to make sure higher education is accessible to students across the country.
But there are also concerns that this will just make inflation worse. We have to hit on that before we let you go. When making this decision and adding up those numbers, how much of a focus was placed on inflation?
Well, look, number one, when someone is struggling close to default, talk about helping them. It's going to give them a little bit more money in their pocketbooks to help with their regular costs, their mortgage or whatever payments they have. And then if you look at reports from Moody's and others, there's an offset here because those making over $125,000 are going to restart payment in January, which means $4 billion is going to be pumped into that. That's going to lower the inflation.
Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona right there for us at the White House. Thank you. Qualify. How do you apply and when can you expect that money?
Well, the qualification is if you make more than $125,000 a year, you do not qualify. If you are part of a couple where your household income is more than $250,000 a year, you do not qualify. But for everyone else who is beneath those salary caps, let's call it, you are qualified. So 8 million Americans are already registered with the Department of Education due to their type of loan. So they actually don't have to go through an application process. They do nothing. Automatic repayment will happen. But for everyone else, and as Mary Alice was just alluding to with you, there will be an application available in the next few weeks, is what the government says, on the Department of Education subscription page. You sign up, you ask to receive updates when the application is ready. Obviously, you put your salary in. They will obviously verify that, and then the application will be processed. But one thing the government has done is they have extended the freezing of all loans, whether you qualify or don't qualify, to the end of this year. And we have to think, in part, that's to give themselves a little bit of running room and a little bit of flexibility. So basically, no matter what your salary is, you do not have to start repaying your loans until January.
Student loan payments pause is going to end. It's going to end December 30. I'm extending to December 31st, 2022, and it's going to end at that time. It's time for the payments to resume. Second, my campaign for president, I made a commitment. I made a commitment that would provide student debt relief, and I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allowed them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced $20,000. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, making under $125,000 a year. If you make more than that, you don't qualify.
Politics. It's what really separates the Republican Party from the Democratic Party. And Republicans are going to make hay of this and say, this is another handout to the liberal elitist base, courtesy of Joe Biden. The Republican Party is a party of the grassroots working class. Setting aside the validity of that, what is the Democratic response to that? How are Democrats going to field this line of complaints? And it will be something you see a lot of between now and November.
My answer is bring it on. Bring it on. $20,000 in student loan debt forgiveness goes to people who had Pell Grants. 95% of the people who have Pell Grants come from families with incomes of less than $60,000. The people who are being helped here, 42% of them don't even have a college diploma. These are not people who went to Harvard the way that Tom Cotton did. These are people who have been scratching it out at state schools, at historically black colleges and universities. They have had to borrow money to get there. They've had to borrow money to stay there, and they've had the hardest time paying off their debts on the other side. And here's the bottom line on this one. Debt cancellation is wildly popular across this country. 2 out of 3 Americans basically say, yeah, we need to do it. The big argument among those who think there should be debt cancellation is whether you ought to cancel 100% of it or whether you ought to focus more of the energy on those who need the help the most. The Republicans have got nothing here. And what we have to remember as we have this fight is there's nobody left in America who doesn't know someone who is struggling with student loan debt.
Of President Biden's plan to cancel student loan debt. Just to recap for you, that plan would forgive up to $20,000 in loan debt for borrowers who went to college on federal Pell Grants. Those grants usually go to undergraduates with the most significant financial need. It would also cancel up to $10,000 for borrowers without Pell Grants. The debt forgiveness would only apply for individuals earning less than $125,000 a year. Here now to start our coverage, ABC News White House senior correspondent Cecilia Vega from the White House there. As you listen to the president and this plan, Cecilia, still it goes without critics. Already the GOP reacting swiftly since the president spoke.
Oh yeah, for sure, Kira. And the calls, the criticism from the GOP seem to be growing louder by the day. And frankly, there's a lot of criticism on both sides from this one. But in terms of what the Republicans are saying right now, look, they're not mincing words. They're calling this a handout. They say that this is a bailout, and they're raising really big questions about where's the fairness in this. They say, what about the people who saved? What about the people who decided not to go to college because they couldn't afford it? What about our veterans, people who joined the military in order to not go to college because they felt like this was something they couldn't pay for? How is this fair for them? But on the other side, Kira, you've got progressives who are basically saying this doesn't go far enough. Many of them had been pushing and lobbying this White House for years, frankly. It took the president, he had talked about student loan forgiveness, debt forgiveness on the campaign trail. It took him over a year and a half to get out on this today and give this speech today. And progressives had wanted him to go even further, frankly. They wanted student debt to be canceled outright. right, or at the very least to cancel $50,000 per person instead of the $10,000 that we're seeing here today. I'd be remiss here if we didn't talk about the timeline of all of this, though, because that is entrenched in the politics of what happens here today with this announcement. Those midterms, you know this, they're right around the corner, and Democrats, this party very much believes that this is an issue that they want President Biden, they want him to be the face of debt cancellation right now, because they very much believe that this could galvanize young voters, that this could galvanize voters of color ahead of the midterms, particularly when you look at some of those numbers. Black students have twice as much student debts as white students when they graduate, so they're really hoping that this is a political win for him today, too.
I think this all really comes together in interesting ways. From post-millennial, Biden to cancel up to $10,000 in student loan debt, extend payment pause until December. And there's also going to be a $20,000 forgiveness, which I believe is additional if you received a Pell Grant. They say, in addition, Pell Grant recipients will see up to $20,000 of their debt canceled. I read somewhere that it was actually in addition to, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's 10 on top of 10 is what I learned.
Is that what it was?
I think so. That's what
someone wrote it was 20 on top of 10, and they may have been mistaken. It was like a mainstream publication or something. But anyway, this ain't it. They're not actually solving the problem of student loan debt. The predatory loan system will still exist. All he's basically doing is giving a tiny bribe to people to vote for him. But I think the bigger issue here that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, James, is universities, these schools, they are subsidized indoctrination machines. And now people are getting a freebie. So it's like they're continually subsidizing in more and more ways. They want it to be free.
Yeah.
Well, of course they want it to be free. I mean, anybody who's sharing a cult religion wants you to come and experience it. And if it costs money to support, they want someone else to pay for it so they can keep funneling people in without hindering themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious what you think about all this.
No, I mean, so this is, there's a whole thing we could get into if you want to about how universities back themselves or painted themselves into this financial corner they're in. But with the students, let me just take one step back and we'll come back into focus because it's going to hit both of the things we were just talking about or all of the things we've been talking about. The agenda behind much of leftist activism, if you read Marcuse says in another essay, it's called The Essay on Liberation of 1969, the first chapter of that, it's an essay, but it's like 170 pages long. So it's, back in the day, kids, we wrote real essays. They weren't 500 words. Sorry, op-eds. No, it's 170 pages. The first chapter of his Essay on Liberation is a biological foundation for socialism. And what he explains is that if you want to get socialism, you have to change the level of people's vital needs. You have to change people in terms of what they need. Now, he has a footnote that says, I don't literally mean biology. So he's not literally advocating for eugenics. And every time he uses the word biological, it has quotes around it. So he means something different by it. And what I finally figured out was what he means by it is that you don't know how to live life without getting your way. In other words, psychopathology. Literally, the definition of psychopathology. It interferes with your ability to engage in daily life. So, every bit of leftist activism that's followed off of Marcuse, which is basically all of this radical left since the 1960s, has at the bottom the goal to create the activists who are going to not be able to figure out how to live their life without getting the policy change that they demand. So, in this case, you give all these kids crazy amounts of student debt, and what do? They become agitators for student loan forgiveness and eventually free college because they want to have the free indoctrination program. And so hand in glove, the colleges become the indoctrination centers, or they're actually the programming centers. They're more like Maoist thought reform prisons than they are like indoctrination. So you turn it into a thought reform prison and you get kids to demand that it be free because you put them in financial dire straits.
They were looking for $50,000, but this is an important step, and as Morgan points out, transformational in the lives of millions of people in this country.
Which definitely, many of us were pushing for $50,000, but we got more than we even thought Biden was going to do, and we're going to keep pushing. I mean, Congress can come into play here. But I think that one thing that Morgan's report showed is there's a disproportionate amount of blacks and Latinos, people of color, that disproportionately have to deal with it because they come from a disproportionate economy. And therefore, the financial backing they have, the foundation they have is much different. So you need this kind of relief. And these are people, I keep repeating it everywhere I've gone in the last 24 hours, that These are people that did the right thing. We're not talking about people that did irresponsible things that fit the stereotype of the welfare mom that Reagan used. We're talking about people that went to school and that were trying to be responsible citizens, and that's going to help this country compete with China and Russia at an educational level, and we're trying to find ways to make them suffer for that. I think that this is not only the right thing to do morally, I think that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with him doing the right thing politically, like keeping a promise that you made. I think that's a good habit for presidents to do.
Yeah.
The president made campaign promises about getting this done. Certainly this is going to land well with those voters going into the midterms.
Well, it will, but the problem, Shannon, politically for the president is that the people celebrating this are anti-American faculty who are poisoning our kids' minds all the time. As you know, I was president of a small college in Wyoming that rejected federal student loans and grants, and we just financed that for our students ourselves. What it meant was that the default rate was basically non-existent because of the close relationship between the lender and the borrower. The problem is that the people celebrating this, like Lawrence Tribe, professor of law at Harvard, need to be turning to the $52 billion endowments at those universities and ask their presidents and their boards the question, why can't you do something to help your alumni? Why can't you do something to help your students? That's the way the everyday American sees this problem, is with just good old-fashioned common sense.
Well, John.
Breaking news coming from the Biden administration. The highly anticipated student loan debt forgiveness program has been released, and hunty, people are up in arms, people are happy, people are sad, people are this, people are that, but baby, people are peopling at this point. All right, so President Biden is planning to have a press conference later on today to discuss this student loan debt plan, but there have been some details that have been released. First things first, the student loan payment pause has been extended a final time through December 31st of 2022. So you won't be making payments on your student loans unless you want to until January, and also the interest is paused until January. The student loan debt payment plan will be forgiving debt of $20,000 if you went to college on Pell Grants, and then $10,000 if you didn't receive any Pell Grants. This forgiveness only applies to those who are earning less than $125,000 per year. If you have undergraduate student loans, you can cap those payments at 5% of your monthly income. As we all know, President Biden's campaign talked a lot about student loan forgiveness, so many people have been waiting on this. In fact, it's been 2 years. I can't wait to see what Quentin Giles has to say about this. According to federal data, more than 43 million people have federal student loan debt with an average balance of $37,667. Nearly a third of those borrowers owe less than $10,000, and about half owe less than $20,000. So with President Biden's announcement, this will potentially erase the federal student loan debt of about 20 million people. There's also been talks about the impact on the racial wealth gap. Black students are more likely to borrow federal student loans and at higher amounts than others. According to data, black borrowers owe an average of nearly $25,000 more than white borrowers, according to the Brookings Institute study. Again, I want to reiterate that you have to be making $105,000 or less a year to be eligible for this debt forgiveness. So the White House has emphasized that no one in the top 5% of incomes will see any loan relief. So this rhetoric that Tom Cotton tweeted saying that Biden owes Americans an explanation on why a truck driver who didn't go to college is now responsible for the student loans of a rich lawyer. Now, I don't know about y'all, but maybe Tom Cotton does not understand that $125,000 does not make you rich, especially if you have a family. So I don't know what truck driver he is referring to, and that they will be having to pay for a rich lawyer's student loans when that's not the case. If this lawyer is truly rich, then he will be paying back his own student loans. So players, put your thoughts in the comments. Are you excited about this? I'm pretty sure this is going to impact President Biden's approval rating. Let me know what you're thinking. This is Double D Mobile, reporter for the Black Accurate News.
A lot of people, you had to say a lot about the student loan crisis. Even experts like and politicians said a lot. Elizabeth Warren was in the package, said that this will help relieve folks who's making ends meet and help them out. Even people on the other side saying this is debt. It's just debt. on top of debt. So debt on top of debt on top of debt. Only time will tell how this all is going to play out and how this all going to work in the favor. A lot of people are saying Biden is using this to boost his approval rating and ensure that he gets his votes for young Americans that are in that class who's getting their student loans wiped away. So there's a lot going on with that. So thank you all for watching this edition of Viral. I've been your host, Kendrick Dix, says so long, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Viral.